All right, guys, I think we can move on to our second session. So Mahesh will be doing a session, and the topic is creating infrastructure with AWS CDK, which is a recently introduced service. Yeah, over to you, Mahesh. Mahesh.
Yes, thank you, Manoj. First of all, let me share my screen. Okay, so basically, this would be an introductory session to AWS CDK. So where I'll be explaining what is AWS CDK, why do we use it, and why do we have to use it, and how AWS CDK is doing whatever it's doing underneath. So let's go ahead and see what is AWS CDK. Okay, so as we are developers, like in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day job, actually, I think almost all of us have met some similar architectures like this with lots of AWS resources connected together. So, and in the same time, there can be scenarios where we all have met where we have to replicate the same environment across multiple regions. Maybe we have to create we have to replicate this architecture uh, across for separate environments like a dev, giveaway, prod like that. Or maybe we have to replicate the same environment again, same architecture again for a new customer. So when a scenario like this happens, the like one thing which you can do, uh, let me first of all stop the video. Okay, so one thing which we can do, the easiest thing which we can do is actually go to the AWS console, implement all of this using the console. And while doing that, we might probably need to maintain a documentation so that we don't miss anything, and like we have everything documented, so that when someone even someone new comes, when even someone new joins the team, they can of course follow it. But but like when this architecture like updates, when new components are being added to this architecture, we again have to go and update the documentation. And but probably not the best experience which you were expecting while doing this. So if someone asks you to solve this issue, probably the first option which you would think of is automating this. So let us see, so what are the options which we have to automate something like this. So these are some popular options. Like, of course, there can be other options as well. One thing is we can use the AWS API. We can use an AWS SDK of some language which we prefer, and we can use that to create our infrastructure. But when it comes to updating this infrastructure using the SDK, it can be quite hassle. And when we are implementing infrastructure using this SDK, we have to define everything, and we have to like make sure we define everything to connect these resources with each other. And we have to like specifically define what happens if something fails. And there are some cases where resources have to wait like until something has come to a specific stage. So like there are so many things which you have to consider while if we are to use AWS SDK, which is not quite the experience which we were hoping when implementing, right? So another popular option we have is using CloudFormation scripts. So CloudFormation is quite a powerful tool, which actually helps us a lot when it comes to like deploying infrastructure as code. But the problem is, even to implement a small thing, we have to write a huge CloudFormation script. I believe all of you all have seen it. So not quite the experience which we're expecting, but still an option, which is probably not the best. And there are the infrastructures, code software tools like Terraform. Terraform is again a really nice tool, a powerful tool, but it's written in order to create infrastructure, we have to learn this new language called HCL, HashiCorp language, which in order to use Terraform. So at the end of the day, in when if you're using Terraform, we might need to learn the new language. And instead of like this time, instead of copying and pasting CloudFormation templates, we probably will end up copying these Terraform scripts, which is again not quite the developer experience which we hope as a software engineers. So how does AWS CDK comes into play? So now after this, now let's see what is actually AWS CDKs, and why should we move on to AWS CDK when it comes to infrastructure as code, and how AWS CDK is actually solving this. So basically, AWS CDK is a software development framework. At the moment, it supports JavaScript, TypeScript, Java, C Sharp, F Sharp, and Python. It's initially written using TypeScript, so they have like so many examples, documentation for TypeScript and for JavaScript as well, and their documentation is little bit lagging in some of the other languages, but of course you can go and take a look at how they have done it in TypeScript and take a pretty good idea. But they have actually like pretty good documentation in all the languages, so it's really easy to follow. And AWS CDK, it provides a high-level object-oriented abstraction of these AWS services. So it's much more comfortable and familiar to us as software engineers, because every day in our day-to-day job, we work with these kind of things. So it makes it much easier to work with AWS CDK. Okay, so why should we move on to AWS CDK rather than using any of the other options which I previously mentioned? So one thing is you can use all this logical support which these like programming languages provides. Like you can use if conditions, switch, loops, all these logical structures, all these control structures we have. We can use all of those when we're implementing this, when we're implementing infrastructure using CDK as well. So and also we can use object-oriented concepts to create our model, uh, to create a model of our infrastructure, which again makes it like familiar for us, from a familiar environment to work for us. Then we can actually organize our project into logical modules. Then we can share and reuse the infrastructure as a library. So let's say we have a common component, and we can like implement that with the best practices, the security and everything which we need to have in it. After that, we can actually reuse this among like different teams maybe, or inside the organization. So which makes it much more easier uh, when you're using CDK. So, and also all the advantages which your ID provides, like let it be code completion, code refactoring, inline documentation, debugging, all of these facilities, because we will be using our ID in order to implement all of these infrastructure. So now how AWS CDK is doing all this? Basically, a CDK application would construct would contain something which calls stacks. It's similar to CloudFormation stacks. I'll come into that later. Where each of these stacks would contain something called constructs, and this construct would represent a single resource or a combination of multiple resources. So I'll explain more on this in the future slides. So we have this CDK application where we have this actual code. Then once we compile this using our CDK CLI, what it does is it converts this into a CloudFormation template. So basically now this command, you can see the CDK synth. We can see that in the demo as well. It will convert our application into a CloudFormation script. So this using this CloudFormation script, AWS CloudFormation will create all our infrastructure uh, in the cloud. So basically, CDK is built on top of AWS CloudFormation, which gives us all of its like powerful features, which has made it like really cool. So moving on, let's see now what is a construct in CDK. So CDK is basically the basic building block. Uh, Construct is basically the basic building block of CDK, which would represent a cloud component. Now, this cloud component, it can be either a single AWS resource. If not, it can be a high-level component which consists of multiple resources, a combination of resources. Like, let's say we have a VPC with several subnets and some EC2 instances, and also with a load balancer. So this can be a construct. Now, EC2 instance would be a construct, VPC would be a construct, a load balancer would be a construct. Now, after combining all these constructs, we can create a high-level construct where we can reuse. So basically, uh, this would create something like a construct tree, which we call, and always root of our construct tree would be the app. I'll be explaining more on this in the future slides, so bear with me. And now AWS has provided this thing called AWS CDK construct library for the basic constructs, like for the resources. Actually, like in order to create those resources, they have provided these basic constructs in their construct library with really good documentation, where you can like easily catch up and easily understand how to implement whatever you want to do. Then when it comes to constructs, there are actually two types of constructs. So one thing is these low level constructs. So these low level constructs, they are always named with this prefix CFN. So if we are using these constructs, then in that case we have to explicitly specify all the properties of that resource. Like so in order to do that, we have to have a clear understanding of the infrastructure which we are going to implement, of the resource which we are using. So unless we have that proper understanding about that resource, it's probably not the best idea to go with low level constructs. And then again, we have these high level constructs. In high level constructs, they provide the same functionality, nothing difference. But in here, they have implemented most of uh, the boilerplate, the glue logic required in order to use that resource. So the difference in here is like we have to only mention the most important parameters, the required parameters, and AWS AWS CDK will take care of the rest. So AWS call this smart defaults. Uh, Smart defaults means like they have tried to assume when a specific user is trying to use a specific resource with another, let's say a Lambda with API gateway, there's a specific set of permissions which you should give. There's a specific set of IAM roles which you have to implement. So what they have done is they have tried to assume what would a user would need in order to perform this, in order to connect this API gateway with Lambda. And they have implemented all the glue logic inside it. And and only thing which you have to do is mention only the most important stuff, and the other would be replaced with defaults. But of course, we can give our own values for those default values as well. They're just optional. So then AWS again have introduced something called construct patterns. Now construct patterns are where now I told you that we can create constructs like combining other basic constructs. So what AWS has done is there are common scenarios uh, which we see in most of the projects which we do. So what they have done is they have picked some like several of uh, those constructs which you would need in our day-to-day job, like those high level constructs, and they have created those and put that in the construct library itself under the name construct patterns. So you can go there and look for it. So you can start you can like implement those easily. So basically the concept in here is we'll be building higher level constructs using lower level constructs, which would at the end of the day lead to a tree like structure, which we call as a construct tree. And always root of this construct tree would be a web. So I mentioned this thing called stack. So basically stack is the basic deployment unit in CDK, and this is implemented using CloudFormation stack. And we all know that when we are deploying with CloudFormation, all the resources would be in the scope of a stack. Therefore, all the constructs would belong into a stack when we are implementing in CDK. You can see this clearly in the demo as well. So if we take if we take an application, there can be multiple CloudFormation stacks. In the same way, in CDK, inside this concept called app, there can be multiple stacks, and inside these stacks, there will be uh, multiple constructs. So app would be the root of the construct tree, and app would be used as the scope for these stack constructs. and it can contain single or multiple stacks. So this is basically the high level architecture of a CDK application, uh, where we have the app, and inside the app we have uh, single or multiple stacks implemented, and inside those stacks we have constructs. Now these constructs, as I mentioned before, they can be high level construct. They can be high level constructs which consist of like multiple basic constructs, and there can even be a basic construct. So now all this will be written in a language uh, which we prefer, and this CDK application would be compiled into CloudFormation template, and this using AWS CloudFormation, this would be converted into infrastructure in our cloud. So yeah, basically that is about that is a basic introduction about CDK. So let's implement it using our code. So in order to start with AWS CDK, there are some things which we need. We need an AWS account and IAM user. IAM user. Then we need to have AWS CLI configured with that IAM user. Then we need to have Node.js a version above 10.3, because AWS CDK is available as a what do you call this, a node module. Then your favorite IDE ready to call. So this is the small demonstration which we are going to implement today. We have a API gateway, we have Lambda function connected to it. So we are just trying to implement this using CDK, which is small, but you see like how easy it is to implement this uh, comparing to using either, let's say, a CloudFormation templates. We'll see that in the demo. So in the demo, I'll be focusing more on these commands. We'll see how this is done. So let me take you all to the demonstration. Okay. Okay. So let me first of all open a terminal. Now, when you're creating a CDK application, first of all, you need to go inside the project folder to start. After that, you can use the command CDK init in order to uh, start your application. Now, if you give CDK init, it should show some options. Let's see. Now, in order to do all this, you have, first of all, you need to like install CDK as a CDK globally. Now, I have completed all of that. That's why I'm straight away starting with this. So when you give CDK init, it shows us what are the available options which we have. If you are going to create an app like this, then we can use this command CDK app, and we can specify the language. And if you are going to create a construct library, then we have to use TypeScript for that, as I told you before, because uh, CDK is implemented using TypeScript. Then if we and there are sample apps which AWS has provided us. If we have to use those, then we can of course use CDK in its sample app. So in this case, I'll be just trying to implement an app. So I'll just have to do CDK init app dash dash language, and as language in here I'll be choosing JavaScript. You can choose whatever the language which you would prefer. Okay, so now it's executing the npm installs and everything, and it will take some time. Therefore, I ran this before in another project and prepared this. Okay, so we'll continue with this. It will take some time for this to complete. I'll stop this here. Okay, let's see. Meetup here. Okay, so once we have done that, this would be now in here I'll be using Visual Studio Code. You can use whatever the ID which you want. So this would be the basic project structure, the project's folder structure. So let me take you all through this for a little bit. Now, this bin folder, in there we have this would be the entry point for application. So in here you can see there's something called app. This would be the app concept which I explained in the slides. And then in here you can see we have created a new objects called with something called Meetup stack. So this would be actually a stack. This would be the app. Inside the app, uh, we have already defined a stack. Now all our construct would go inside this stack. So now that stack's implementation would be inside this lib folder. So this would be basically where we do most of our coding. Okay, so this is basically the stack class. Now you can see in the constructor it's taking a scope, ID, and properties. So what this scope is, basically it means to which construct this belongs. So this stack construct, it belongs to the app, and whatever the other constructs which we create inside this stack would belong to this scope. Then we have this ID. This ID is actually not the ID which CloudFormation is going to use, like the logical ID which CloudFormation is going to use, because it would be a much more complex one. This is, but still this ID has to be unique inside its scope, because this ID would be used by CloudFormation in order to create a mapping between our code and whatever CloudFormation is actually implementing inside our cloud. And then of course we have the properties, whatever we need to pass into the construct. So now what we need to do in here is we need to implement a Lambda function, and also we need to create API gateway and create an event trigger from API gateway to the Lambda function. So first of all, let's create the Lambda function. In order to so in order to create the Lambda function, we can use the Lambda construct. Now let's go to AWS CDK construct library. Now this is the AWS CDK construct library where they have like really good documentation where you can refer. So let me go and find out where's Lambda. Okay, we have it here. Okay, so in order to use this AWS Lambda module, I will need to install this module. So in here, I can install this as an npm module here. Uh, I have actually installed all of this just for the time's sake. But of course, we can install this just like this really easily. We can install this module, and once we once we have installed these modules, uh, like since I have already installed this, I don't think we need to have that. Yeah, I'll just cancel this. Okay, so then I'll import Lambda module which we have downloaded. Lambda. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to create our Lambda. So let me call this greetings Lambda, and I'm going to create a new object with this. This imported Lambda. Now as you can see, since we are using our IDs, we have all this inline documentation support as well. So now what I need to create is a function. So here I'm going to create a Lambda function. Now as I told you before, this supports the pattern, like every construct needs to be provided with the scope, the ID, and the properties. And when it comes to this, okay, first of all, I'll provide the scope. The scope would be this, and the ID, I'll call this let's say I'll call this greetings Lambda. After that, we need to have the options, the properties. So this, when it comes to these properties, you can see what are the properties which you have to which we can provide. So in here you can see there's a property called code, then handler, then runtime. Then when it comes to this allow all outbound, you can see there's something called something like at default in here, which means except for the first three, all the others are optional. So I can of course just create a Lambda function with just these three options. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Let me start Lambda, and in here we have runtime. And since I'm using Node.js, I'll choose Node.js as the runtime. And now we need to provide code for Lambda. Let me define that as well. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a separate folder called Lambda. And in here, let me define a new file, greetings.js. And in here, I'm going to define the code which would go inside my Lambda. So let me just copy paste this. So it would say greetings, say AWS user group. Okay, that's nice. Then next we can define the code where it's coming from. Okay, then code will be coming from lambda dot set code, wait, to lambda dot code dot from a set. It would be inside this folder lambda. So I'll provide that. Then we have to provide the handler. So for handler, I'll give something like greetings. Okay. Now we have this. We have our lambda implemented. Now let's see the CloudFormation script for this. So in order to get that, we can use the command CDK synth. If I use CDK synth, now it should show the CloudFormation script for this. Let's see. Okay, here we have it. See, as you can see, it it all the permission, the roles, the code, and everything in here. So there's another command which I would like to show to you all, which would be CDK diff. Now what CDK diff does is it compares with whatever we have inside our code and with whatever we have already deployed in our cloud. So it would compare between those two, and it would show what are the differences between, like what are the differences between those two. So in here, according to this, we have actually basically we have all these different from whatever we have in the cloud. Okay, now we have the lambda implemented. So let me quickly go and get the API gateway as well. Okay, here we have API gateway. So in order to use API gateway, again, you have to download this, and I have downloaded that as well. So let's quickly create this. Let's quickly first of all API gateway. Okay, then I'll create the API gateway. Now, since we are trying to create a REST API with Lambda, there's a function called Lambda REST API, which we can easily create this. So when we are creating this, we have to again follow the same pattern: the scope, the ID, and the properties. So the scope would be this, and for the ID, I would call the greetings API. Then the properties. So in the properties, uh, we have to provide the handler for this, like the lambda which we are going to trigger, and we can simply mention greetings lambda since we have mentioned this in here. And I'll add another. Now, as I can remember, this is all which is needed for API gateway. So yeah, as I can remember, this is all required for this, but I'll add this small option deploy true, where like it says like I need to deploy and update uh, everything in the cloud like each and every time I uh, update this. Okay, so we are done with that. Yes. Okay, then we can simply go and do a CDK deploy, which should deploy this into our cloud. Now, since this is not the first time I'm doing this, okay, so it's it's asking whether I want to deploy all of these changes. As you can see, like I didn't have to mention any of the Lambda roles, uh, Lambda policies, issues, like any of the any triggers or anything. I just had to create these two like these two objects and connect these two, just like we are doing in our day-to-day jobs, like while working with some other software framework. So we can really easily implement all of this. Then okay, uh, yeah, okay, nice. So now the thing is, now this since I deleted the Meetup stack, okay, so before adding something to AWS, like for the AWS for the first time using AWS CDK, we have to first of all run something called CDK Bootstrap. Now it would create a uh, let's see, it would create a stack in here so that AWS CDK can communicate with AWS CloudFormation. So what it basically creates is it would be creating a S3 bucket where it can upload the CloudFormation template which would be created by CDK. Then it can process it in there, then create a stack. So when you are trying to deploy an application for the first time, first of all you would have to run CDK Bootstrap, and after that only you can actually deploy the um, application here. So hopefully it won't take a long time. We'll see. Yes, it's done. So if we go to the uh, stack and see in there we only have a single resource, like only a S3 bucket where it needs to store our CloudFormation templates. Okay, now I can do a CDK deploy in here. Yes, okay, it's starting, and it won't probably take a long time. Actually, okay, see here we have our stack, and it's currently deploying. Nobody found it. Yes, so as soon as we are done, we will have all the setup which we need with whatever we have implemented. Long time, actually, this didn't take a long time when I was doing that before. We'll see. Yeah, okay, it's implemented. Can so we can go and check in API Gateway whether that has been created yet. Yes, we have our greetings API created. If we go to Lambda and see, now in here I haven't specified a region or anything. So if you want, you can specify the region as well. It's at the moment like a stack would be a stack would deploy everything into a single region. So inside the stack, okay, now we have everything deployed. So let me go and just check with this URL. Just copy this and check whether we have everything ready. Greetings. Yes. So that's basically how we use AWS CDK in order to create a infrastructure. Uh, in order to provide some more insights to you all now, wait, where is? Okay. So this is the application, and this would be our stack. Now let's say we need to have the same thing across multiple regions. Let's say, and we need to create two stacks. So we can easily create two stacks like this, but this IDs has to be different. And let's say uh, let's say like we need this to be in like two different regions. So for that we can pass the property and say that this should belong to this region, like that. Let's say this should belongs to let's say US East 1, and this should belongs to AP South 1. So just like this, we can really easily implement multiple stacks as well inside our app. So this is basically infrastructure in code. So that is about it. I mean, that's what I have prepared so far for today's session. So if there is anything I would like to answer, let me go back to the slides. Yes. Yeah. So if you're interested, like I have added some links inside my slides, so you can, of course, look into that in case if you're interested. Uh, yes. Thank you. And if there are any questions, yes,
Yeah.
Manoj, you can take away.
Yeah. Thank you, Mahesh. Quite interesting session. Yeah, I think we can take some questions. By the way, I have one quick question. Like in your presentation, you showed there are different types of construct, low-level construct and high-level constructs, right? And also you
Yes, sir.
mentioned there are construct patterns. So could you elaborate a little bit on what
Yes.
is construct pattern and on that?
Okay, that is basically like just naming which AWS has used for like whatever they have included in their construct library. For like whatever they haven't provided much of high level constructs in their like construct library, but still like there are some, let me just go and show you quickly. Uh, okay, if I just show up, wait, patterns. This is basically again a high level construct. It's just that they have used the name pattern in order to identify it, like inside the CDK construct library, that this is not a basic construct, but this is a high level construct. So in
Mm.
here you can see now this has this application load balancer with the EC2 configured. So it has this basic constructs combined together, so you can easily use this component rather than creating that by yourself.
Awesome.
So that's basically the difference between the pattern and a high level. Actually, there's no difference. It's just the naming.
Thanks, Mahesh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So guys, do we have other questions? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, right. Looks like we don't have any other questions. So thank you very much, Mahesh. That was really an interesting presentation. And yeah, I think we can directly use CDK.
Can
Hi, can you hear?
yeah,
Okay.
of course I can hear.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you again, Mahesh. I think that's it we have planned for our April's meetup. So I should once again thanks Nader David for accepting our invitation with a short notice, and also Mahesh. So thank you very much, guys. All right, I think that's it we have planned for today, and I will see you in the next meetup. Thanks, guys. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Yes, thank you, Mahesh. See you. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Yep. Bye, guys. Thank you.
See you guys. Bye.